Hey there, receptionist. What's your rank? Petty Officer Jake Morrison called out with a smirk, his voice echoing across the DFIC at Naval Base Little Creek in front of 80 people. Myrna Walsh, wearing a light gray button-down shirt, continued stamping security badges with steady rhythm, 2.3 seconds between each stamp, without looking up. Petty Officer Morrison, your guest list has been confirmed. Please direct your family members to the designated area, she replied coolly, placing her Parker Jotter pen in the exact position on her clipboard. Morrison pushed the paperwork toward her more forcefully than necessary. Do civilians like you even understand SEAL operations? Myrna adjusted her shirt and stood straight with perfect military posture as the radio from the security booth crackled. Base comm, suspicious activity at Gate 3. She rose with bearing that would take Morrison 6 more months of advanced training to learn. A worn challenge coin slipped from her clipboard, hitting the floor with an unusual metallic ring. Morrison glanced at it. Just another piece of base memorabilia, he thought. But Master Chief Rodriguez saw the coin's design clearly, his eyes widening, until she opened her mouth to respond to the radio call with an authentication code that made the entire DFIC freeze. But let's back up to how this all started. The morning rush at Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek carried the familiar sounds of military precision mixed with family excitement. Myrna Walsh arrived at her workstation in the main administration building at 0730, just as she had every morning for the past 8 months. Her routine was methodical: check overnight security reports, review the day's visitor schedules, prepare guest registration materials for the afternoon ceremony. At 34 years old, Myrna had perfected the art of professional invisibility. Her light gray shirt was always pressed, but unremarkable. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail that met regulations without drawing attention. She moved through her duties with quiet efficiency that supervisors appreciated and coworkers barely noticed. The visitor registration desk sat in the main corridor leading to the DFAC, positioned perfectly to manage foot traffic during peak hours. Families arriving for the ceremony would pass her station first, ensuring proper security procedures were followed before they joined the celebration. It was routine work that required attention to detail but offered the anonymity she had been seeking since accepting this position. As the morning progressed, activity increased throughout the building. Today marked the graduation ceremony for Buds Class 287, 26 men who had completed one of the military's most grueling training programs. Their families had traveled from across the country to witness the moment their sons and husbands officially became Navy SEALs. Morrison and his team of 6 had been particularly vocal throughout the morning. Fresh from their graduation, they carried themselves with the confidence of men who had just achieved something extraordinary. The SEAL trident on their uniforms was still new enough to catch the light, and they wore it with unmistakable pride. At 24 years old, Morrison represented the typical SEAL graduate, physically elite, mentally tough, and absolutely certain of his place in the military hierarchy. His teammates looked to him as their informal leader, drawn to his assertive personality and quick wit. Together, they formed the kind of a tight-knit group that military training was designed to create. The morning passed without incident until 11:45, when families began gathering in the DFAC for lunch before the afternoon ceremony. Myrna's workload increased as she processed security badges, verified guest lists, and directed visitors to appropriate seating areas. The corridor filled with proud parents, supportive spouses, and excited children, all eager to celebrate their loved ones' achievements. Morrison's group claimed a table near the registration area, their conversation growing louder as they fed off each other's energy. Their discussion centered on their recent graduation, future assignments, and the exclusive nature of the SEAL community. Anyone within earshot could hear their commentary about the special nature of their brotherhood and the sacrifices required to earn their place among America's elite warriors. It was during this period of increased activity that Morrison first noticed Myrna's presence at the registration desk. To him, she represented everything civilian, someone who worked on a military base without understanding its true purpose or appreciating the caliber of personnel she was serving. In his mind, she was simply administrative support, necessary but fundamentally separate from the warrior culture that defined his new identity. The DFAC itself buzzed with pre-ceremony energy. Approximately 200 personnel and family members filled the space, creating a celebration atmosphere that honored both individual achievement and collective service. steam from the galley mixed with conversations in multiple languages as military families from diverse backgrounds gathered to support their SEALs. Myrna worked efficiently at her station, processing the steady stream of visitors who required security clearance for the ceremony. Her movements were economical and precise, each stamp placed with mechanical consistency, each interaction handled with professional courtesy. But Master Chief Rodriguez, observing from across the corridor, noticed subtleties that others missed. Rodriguez had spent 28 years in naval service, including 15 years with various special operations units. His eye for military bearing was exceptional, honed through decades of training and leading elite personnel. As he watched Myrna work, small details caught his attention that suggested more than civilian employment. When she stood to retrieve additional forms from a nearby cabinet, her posture was automatically correct, shoulders back, chin level, weight evenly distributed. When she moved between different stations, she maintained situational awareness, unconsciously tracking foot traffic and potential obstacles. When she handled radio communications with security personnel, her voice carried the kind of clarity and authority that came from operational experience. These observations remained peripheral to Rodriguez's attention until the incident began escalating around noon. Morrison's team had finished their meal and were lingering near the registration area when their conversation turned from celebration to commentary about base personnel. Their remarks became increasingly pointed about the civilian employees who worked among military personnel without truly understanding their mission or sacrifice. The shift from casual conversation to directed commentary occurred gradually. Morrison began with general observations about the difference between military and civilian mindsets. His teammates contributed their own perspectives, building on each other's comments until their discussion became a performance for anyone within earshot. Torres, Morrison's closest friend in the group, suggested that civilian employees should show more obvious respect for military personnel, particularly SEALs who had earned their place through extraordinary effort. Wilson, the youngest of their group at 22, seemed less comfortable with the direction of their conversation, but didn't challenge his teammates. It was Chavez who suggested that Morrison test whether the civilian staff truly understood military protocols and hierarchy. The suggestion was delivered with a smile, but it carried the unmistakable challenge that young warriors often use to establish dominance and demonstrate their newly acquired status. Morrison accepted the challenge without hesitation. His teammates gathered around the registration desk, creating an audience for whatever interaction was about to unfold. Their positioning was deliberate, close enough to hear everything, spread out enough to make Myrna feel surrounded, confident enough to make clear they expected entertainment from the encounter. The direct confrontation began at exactly 12:03 when Morrison approached Myrna's desk with exaggerated friendliness that barely concealed his condescending intent. His opening question about her rank was delivered loud enough for his teammates to hear clearly, setting the tone for what he expected to be a brief demonstration of civilian ignorance about military culture. Myrna's response was professional and measured, addressing Morrison by rank and providing the information he had requested about his guest list. Her tone carried no defensiveness or irritation, just the calm competence of someone accustomed to handling various types of personalities under pressure. She continued her work without breaking rhythm, stamping security badges with the same mechanical precision she had maintained all morning. Morrison interpreted her composure as dismissiveness. In his experience, civilians either showed obvious deference to military personnel or demonstrated ignorance about military culture through awkward attempts at familiarity. Myrna's response fit neither category, which frustrated his expectations and encouraged him to escalate his approach. His follow-up question about SEAL operations was more direct and challenging. The implication was clear. As a civilian employee, she couldn't possibly understand the complexity and importance of what SEALs did, and her presence on the base was purely functional rather than meaningful. His teammates chuckled appreciatively, encouraging his performance and waiting for her reaction. But Myrna continued working with the same unruffled competence, offering to help with any specific needs he might have, rather than engaging with his challenge. Her professional demeanor remained intact despite the public nature of the confrontation and the growing attention from nearby families and personnel. The failure to provoke an obvious reaction pushed Morrison toward more explicit disrespect. His comment about civilians understanding SEAL operations was delivered with enough volume and contempt to make families nearby uncomfortable. Parents with children looked away, clearly wanting to avoid involvement in the confrontation. Elderly visitors, likely veterans themselves, frowned but said nothing. This was the moment when Master Chief Rodriguez's attention shifted from casual observation to active concern. The public nature of the disrespect, combined with Myrna's unusually controlled response, created a situation that required senior leadership attention. But before Rodriguez could intervene, the interaction took an unexpected turn. A radio call from the security booth requested communication testing across all base frequencies. It was routine protocol before any large gathering, ensuring that all security posts could coordinate effectively during the ceremony. Myrna's response to the radio call revealed the first clear indication that her background might include more than civilian employment. Roger that, base comm. Establishing comms with posts Alpha through Delta and maintaining overwatch on civilian frequencies during the exercise, she replied without hesitation. The military terminology flowed naturally. Roger instead of okay, establishing comms instead of setting up communications, overwatch instead of monitoring. These weren't terms picked up from casual exposure to military language. They were operational vocabulary that came from training and experience. Rodriguez felt the first stirring of recognition. The radio procedure was flawless, the terminology precise, the confidence complete. Civilian employees might learn basic radio protocols, but the subtle competence in Myrna's communication suggested something much more substantial than on-the-job training. The radio test began promptly, with security posts around the base responding in sequence to confirm communication readiness. Myrna coordinated the civilian frequency with professional competence that exceeded what Rodriguez expected from administrative staff. Post Alpha, this is base comm, radio check, over, she transmitted with perfect clarity. Base comm, post Alpha, 5x5, over, came the immediate response. Post Alpha, base comm, good copy, standby for exercise traffic. Her voice was clear and authoritative, using proper military communication procedures without any hesitation. She managed 6 different frequency channels simultaneously, maintaining awareness of both security traffic and civilian coordination requirements while Morrison's team stood nearby, their earlier entertainment faltering as they listened to her professional performance. "Holy cow," Wilson whispered. "She sounds like she's done this before." "Civilians can learn radio procedures," Morrison replied, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "It's not that complicated." But Torres, who had been responsible for communications during several training exercises, recognized the subtle competence in Myrna's radio work. She wasn't just following a script or repeating trained responses. She was adapting to real-time changes, prioritizing traffic, and maintaining situational awareness across multiple channels simultaneously. The performance indicated genuine understanding of communication protocols rather than memorized procedures. The exercise concluded after 15 minutes, with all posts confirming readiness for the ceremony. Myrna secured the radio equipment and returned to her administrative duties, but Rodriguez continued watching her with growing interest. Her bearing during the radio test had been completely professional, her procedures flawless, her confidence absolute. When Lieutenant Commander Hayes approached the registration area to review security arrangements for the afternoon ceremony, Myrna's interaction with him provided additional evidence of unusual competence. She briefed him on guest registration numbers, security badge procedures, and coordination with base security using the kind of organized presentation that suggested experience with operational briefings. "Sir, we have processed 137 guests for the ceremony," she reported. "All security badges have been issued with proper clearance levels, and coordination with base security confirms all posts are ready for the 1400 ceremony start time." Hayes nodded approvingly at the briefing, but Rodriguez noticed how Myrna delivered information in the concise, organized format that military personnel used for operational updates. Civilian employees might provide the same information, but typically in conversational format rather than formal briefing structure. As the lunch period continued, Morrison's team found themselves increasingly puzzled by what they had observed. Their initial assessment of Myrna as a clueless civilian employee no longer matched the evidence of her performance during the radio test and security coordination. But Morrison wasn't ready to abandon his position. "This is about respect," Morrison explained to his teammates, his voice carrying to nearby seats. We earn our place here through blood, sweat, and determination. The least civilian employees can do is acknowledge that hierarchy and show appropriate appreciation for what we've accomplished. The families around them listened with growing discomfort. These men were supposed to represent the best of American military service, but their behavior toward a key helpful staff member seemed unnecessarily cruel. Myrna continued her work, seemingly oblivious to the ongoing commentary about her supposed inadequacies and lack of understanding about military culture. But Rodriguez noticed details that others missed. When she moved between different sections of the ceremony area, she automatically checked sightlines and potential security concerns. When a maintenance vehicle approached the perimeter, her attention shifted to track its movement until she confirmed it was authorized personnel. These weren't conscious actions, but automatic responses, muscle memory built through years of training in environments where situational awareness meant survival. The radio on Rodriguez's belt crackled to life with another routine communication. Security to Master Chief Rodriguez, we need coordination for VIP arrival procedures. Admiral Thompson will be arriving at 13:30 for the ceremony. Copy that, Rodriguez replied, then looked at Myrna. Miss Walsh, we'll need you to coordinate VIP security protocols during Admiral Thompson's arrival. Can you handle the coordination? It was a simple request, the kind of routine task assigned to civilian staff during security exercises. But Myrna's response revealed more than she probably intended. Roger that, Master Chief. I'll establish coordination with security posts and maintain communications oversight during VIP arrival procedures. The military terminology flowed naturally, without hesitation or translation. Roger, not okay. Establish coordination, not set up communications. Communications oversight, not radio monitoring. These were terms that came from operational experience, not civilian employment. Rodriguez felt a chill of recognition. He had worked with enough operators over the years to recognize authentic military bearing and communication protocols when he encountered them. Myrna Walsh wasn't just a civilian employee who had picked up military language from her work environment. She was someone with genuine training and experience working in a position far below her apparent qualifications. The VIP arrival coordination began at 13:15, when Admiral Thompson's security detail contacted base communications to confirm arrival procedures. Myrna managed the coordination with multiple security posts, ensuring that all personnel understood their responsibilities for the Admiral's movement from the main gate to the ceremony area. Security posts, this is Base Comm, stand by for VIP arrival coordination, she transmitted with complete authority. Admiral Thompson's vehicle will arrive at main gate at 13:30. Security escort will proceed via Route Alpha to ceremony area. All posts maintain visual contact and report any concerns immediately. Her coordination was flawless, managing complex communication requirements while maintaining situational awareness of all moving parts in the security operation. Rodriguez watched her performance with growing amazement, recognizing operational-level competence that exceeded most trained military personnel. Morrison's group was close enough to hear her coordination work, and their conversation had shifted from entertainment to confusion. The woman they had been mocking for her supposed ignorance was demonstrating communication skills that exceeded their own training. You know, Torres said thoughtfully, I've been thinking about what happened earlier. Maybe we judged her too quickly. She's just doing her job, Morrison replied, but his voice carried less certainty than before. The confidence that had characterized his earlier comments was being undermined by evidence that contradicted his assumptions about Myrna's capabilities. Wilson looked back toward the registration desk where Myrna was efficiently managing post-coordination duties while maintaining her administrative responsibilities. The tactical precision she had shown throughout the morning was becoming harder to dismiss as coincidental or learned from civilian employment. Admiral Thompson arrived precisely at 13:30, his staff vehicle approaching the ceremony area with military precision. As the base's commanding officer, Thompson commanded immediate respect from everyone present. SEALs came to attention, families stood respectfully, and the atmosphere became more formal in recognition of his rank and authority. But Rodriguez noticed something others missed. When Admiral Thompson stepped out of his vehicle, Myrna's posture shifted automatically, shoulders straightened, chin lifted, weight distributed evenly on both feet. It was parade rest executed perfectly without conscious thought. The muscle memory was unmistakable. Civilian employees didn't stand that way, not ever. That level of automatic response to senior military presence came from years of drilling the same reaction until it became instinctive. Rodriguez made a decision that would change everything. He approached Myrna as she completed VIP arrival coordination and prepared for the ceremony opening procedures. "Miss Walsh, I need to ask you something, and I'd appreciate a straight answer," Rodriguez said quietly. "Have you had military training? Because what I'm observing doesn't match someone with civilian background." The question hung between them for several seconds. Myrna's face revealed nothing, but Rodriguez saw her hand pause slightly on the radio equipment. The careful professional distance that had characterized all her interactions was being challenged directly. "I've had some experience with military procedures, Master Chief." "Nothing formal," she replied smoothly. It was a deflection, expertly delivered, but incomplete. Rodriguez recognized the technique from his own operational experience. When personnel couldn't tell the truth but didn't want to lie outright, they offered partial information and hoped the questioner would accept it without further inquiry. "Some experience," Rodriguez repeated carefully. "Miss Walsh, I've been doing this for 28 years. What I'm seeing isn't some experience. This is professional-level competence that comes from extensive training and operational application." Before Myrna could respond, Senior Chief Hawkins approached their position. Tom Hawkins had spent 15 years training SEAL candidates and had developed an exceptional eye for military bearing and tactical competence. His attention had been drawn to Myrna's performance throughout the morning, and he wanted to understand what he was observing. "Master Chief," Hawkins said, nodding to Rodriguez, then turning to Myrna. "Ma'am, I've been watching your work today. Your coordination techniques and communication protocols are exceptional. Where did you learn tactical communication management?" Another direct question, another opportunity for deflection. But this time, multiple senior enlisted personnel were paying attention, and Myrna's options for avoiding scrutiny were narrowing. Two of the most experienced leaders on the base were asking questions that required answers. "I've always been interested in organization and logistics, Senior Chief. It's just common sense to maintain clear communications and ensure proper coordination," she replied. Common sense didn't explain the specific techniques they had observed. Myrna was managing communication protocols with the kind of precision taught in advanced military courses, not basic civilian training. Her performance indicated understanding of tactical communication principles that went far beyond administrative support responsibilities. Morrison's group had been watching the interaction from their position near the ceremony area, and their earlier amusement was shifting to genuine curiosity. Why were two senior enlisted leaders showing so much interest in a civilian staff member? Why were they asking questions that seemed to suggest she might have more background than her position indicated? "Maybe she's more than she appears," Wilson suggested quietly. "Please," Morrison replied, but his voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. "She's administrative support. We shouldn't overthink this." But Torres was studying Myrna more carefully now, noting details he had missed during their earlier confrontation. The way she moved with economic efficiency, her automatic scanning of the environment, the calm way she had handled their verbal pressure without becoming defensive or upset. Her responses had been measured and professional rather than emotional or intimidated. The ceremony preparation continued with families taking their assigned seating and military personnel assuming their positions for the formal proceedings. Admiral Thompson would address the gathering before presenting awards to distinguished graduates, and the entire event needed to proceed with military precision that honored both individual achievement and collective service. Myrna continued working at the perimeter of the ceremony area, monitoring communication frequencies, tracking late arrivals, and maintaining overall situational awareness of security requirements. But Rodriguez and Hawkins maintained their observation, noting how she positioned herself with clear sight lines to the ceremony platform while maintaining easy access to communication equipment and emergency protocols. Her positioning wasn't coincidental or accidental. She was automatically implementing security procedures that required tactical training to understand and execute properly. Civilian employees might follow basic safety protocols, but the sophistication of her positioning indicated someone with operational background in security management. As the ceremony began, Admiral Thompson took the podium to address the assembled crowd. His remarks would honor the graduating class while acknowledging the sacrifices their families had made to support their journey through SEAL training. The atmosphere was celebratory and respectful, acknowledging both individual achievement and the broader mission that connected all naval personnel. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Thompson announced, "today we recognize the newest members of the SEAL community. These 26 men have completed training that tests every aspect of their physical, mental, and emotional capabilities. They represent the finest traditions of naval special warfare." The crowd responded with enthusiastic applause, families beaming with pride at their loved ones' achievements. Morrison's group joined the applause, their earlier entertainment forgotten in the face of genuine recognition for their accomplishments. These were their peers, their classmates, their brothers-in-arms being honored for completing one of the military's most demanding programs. But Rodriguez continued his observation of Myrna, noting how her attention divided between ceremony security and the Admiral's remarks. Her professional demeanor remained consistent, but he could see increased focus as Thompson discussed the responsibilities and expectations that came with SEAL qualification. The Admiral's speech continued with themes of service, sacrifice, and commitment that resonated with everyone present. But Rodriguez noticed that Myrna's response was different from the civilian guests around her. She maintained perfect attention throughout Thompson's remarks, her bearings shifting to formal military posture without conscious thought. When Thompson concluded his opening remarks and began individual recognition of distinguished graduates, the ceremony atmosphere became more formal and focused. Each graduate would receive specific acknowledgement for achievements during training, and their families would share in the recognition through photographs and formal presentation. The first graduate recognized was Petty Officer James Chen, who had demonstrated exceptional leadership during the final training exercise. His citation described tactical decision-making and team coordination that had contributed to successful mission completion under challenging conditions. As Chen stepped forward to receive his certificate, Rodriguez noticed that Myrna's attention became more focused and personal. For the first time since he had been observing her, she showed genuine emotional response to the ceremony proceedings. Her professional detachment shifted to something that might have been recognition or remembrance. The recognition continued with other graduates receiving acknowledgement for various achievements: medical training, technical proficiency, physical fitness excellence, and academic performance. Each citation highlighted different aspects of SEAL qualification while emphasizing the comprehensive nature of their training. But when Admiral Thompson announced special recognition for graduates who had overcome significant challenges during training, Myrna's emotional response became more evident. Rodriguez saw tears forming at the corners of her eyes, carefully controlled but unmistakable. Whatever her background included, these proceedings carried personal meaning that went beyond professional responsibility. Morrison noticed Rodriguez's continued attention to Myrna and felt his earlier confidence continuing to erode. The senior leadership interest in a civilian employee suggested something he had missed, something that made his earlier behavior potentially problematic rather than merely entertaining. The ceremony continued with formal presentation of SEAL pins to each graduate. The moment when Admiral Thompson attached the trident to each uniform represented the culmination of months of extraordinary effort and sacrifice. Families captured photographs, while fellow SEALs offered congratulations that acknowledged both individual achievement and membership in an exclusive brotherhood. As the formal ceremony concluded and families began gathering for the reception, Rodriguez approached Myrna again. His observations throughout the afternoon had convinced him that her background included military training far beyond anything consistent with civilian employment. The question was whether she would be willing to discuss it. "Miss Walsh," Rodriguez said quietly, "I'd like to continue our conversation from earlier. Do you have a few minutes for a private discussion?" Myrna looked around the ceremony area, confirming that her immediate responsibilities were complete and that the reception could proceed without her direct involvement. The formal program had ended successfully, and her duties were shifting to post-event coordination. "Of course, Master Chief. What can I help you with?" They walked toward a quieter area away from the reception activity, Rodriguez choosing a location where their conversation wouldn't be overheard or interrupted. His approach was careful and respectful, recognizing that whatever Myrna's background included, she had chosen civilian employment for reasons that deserved consideration. "I want to understand who you really are," Rodriguez said directly. "What I've observed today doesn't match someone with civilian background. Your communication protocols are flawless. Your security positioning shows tactical training. Your bearing in the presence of senior officers follows automatic military protocol. These aren't skills you develop working at an administrative desk. Myrna stopped walking and turned to face him directly. For the first time since their initial interaction, Rodriguez saw past her careful professional mask to something deeper underneath. The controlled composure that had characterized all her interactions was showing strain under direct questioning about her background. "Master Chief, some questions are better left unasked. Some answers are better left unspoken," she replied carefully. It was neither confirmation nor denial, but Rodriguez heard something in her voice that made him reconsider his approach. There was weight behind her words, carefully controlled emotion that suggested whatever her background included, it carried significance she wasn't ready to discuss with someone she barely knew. "I understand," Rodriguez said gently. "But I want you to know that if you ever need support, if you ever need someone who understands the military community, I'm available." Myrna's expression softened slightly, the first time Rodriguez had seen her professional facade relax. "Thank you, Master Chief. I appreciate that more than you know." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Senior Chief Hawkins, who had been coordinating reception logistics but had noticed their private discussion. His expression suggested he had information that would add complexity to their understanding of Myrna's situation. "Master Chief," Hawkins said, addressing Rodriguez formally, "we need to discuss the afternoon security report. There have been some developments that require senior leadership attention." "What kind of developments?" Rodriguez asked, his attention shifting to potential security concerns that might affect base operations. Hawkins glanced at Myrna, then back to Rodriguez. "We should discuss this privately, but it may be relevant to our earlier conversation about personnel qualifications and background verification procedures." The cryptic response suggested that Hawkins had learned something about Myrna that required careful handling. Rodriguez understood the implication. Whatever information Hawkins had discovered needed to be discussed in a secure environment away from casual observation. "Miss Walsh," Rodriguez said, turning back to Myrna, "thank you for your time today. We'll continue this conversation later, when circumstances permit." As Rodriguez and Hawkins walked toward the administration building, Myrna remained at the ceremony area, watching the reception proceed with families celebrating their graduates' achievements. But she knew that her carefully maintained anonymity was beginning to unravel. The questions from senior leadership would only intensify, and her options for deflecting scrutiny were becoming limited. Morrison approached her as families began departing, and the reception wound down. His teammates had been discussing their earlier behavior throughout the afternoon, and the growing evidence of Myrna's competence had made them increasingly uncomfortable with their initial assessment. "Miss Walsh," Morrison said, approaching with obvious discomfort, "I wanted to apologize for my behavior earlier. What I said was inappropriate, and you deserved much better treatment from me." Myrna looked at the young SEAL, noting the sincerity in his expression and the obvious effort it took for him to acknowledge his mistake publicly. "Petty Officer Morrison, I appreciate your apology. Military service teaches us many lessons, and learning from our mistakes is one of the most important." "Ma'am," Torres added as he approached with Wilson and Chavez, "we had no idea about your background, but that's no excuse for our disrespect. What you demonstrated today during the communication coordination was exceptional." Wilson nodded agreement. "We misjudged you completely, and we're sorry for that. Whatever your experience includes, you clearly understand military operations better than we gave you credit for." Myrna's response was professional and gracious, but Morrison could see that their apology, while appreciated, didn't erase the damage their earlier behavior had caused. They had publicly questioned her competence and place in the military community, and those words couldn't be simply taken back. "Gentlemen," she said finally, "military service teaches us about judgment and assumptions. Perhaps this experience will help you approach future situations with more consideration for what you might not know about the people around you." It was gentle correction rather than harsh condemnation, but the lesson was clear. Their behavior had been based on assumptions rather than evidence, and they had learned something valuable about the dangers of judging people based on superficial indicators rather than demonstrated competence. As the afternoon shifted toward evening and the base began returning to normal operations, Myrna completed her post-ceremony duties and prepared to leave for the day. But she carried with her the knowledge that questions about her background would only intensify. Too many senior personnel had noticed too many inconsistencies between her position and her performance. The careful anonymity she had maintained for 8 months was ending, but she wasn't certain she was ready for the exposure and scrutiny that would follow. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and potentially uncomfortable revelations about a past she had been trying to leave behind. The next morning arrived with the crisp clarity that only followed significant shifts in routine and relationships. Myrna Walsh walked through the main gate at Naval Base Little Creek at 0730, her movements carrying the same professional efficiency they always had. But the conversations from the previous afternoon had created an undercurrent of tension that would soon surface in ways she couldn't control. Word had begun spreading through the base overnight with the speed that only military communities could achieve. Senior Chief Hawkins had made several phone calls after his conversation with Rodriguez, and the responses he received had fundamentally changed how leadership viewed Myrna's presence at the base. Rodriguez had spent most of the evening reviewing personnel files and making discreet inquiries through channels he had developed over nearly 3 decades of naval service. The information he gathered painted a picture that was both impressive and concerning, requiring careful handling by personnel with appropriate security clearances and operational experience. At 0800, Captain Mitchell received a priority communication that would transform the morning's routine activities into something far more significant. The message came through secure channels from Naval Special Warfare Command, marked with classification levels that immediately captured his attention. Captain Mitchell, the communication began, "You have a personnel situation requiring immediate assessment. Civilian employee Myrna Walsh may be operating under protective identity following classified service with DevGru. Request immediate but discreet verification and security assessment." Mitchell read the message twice, understanding immediately that his base was dealing with something far more complex than routine personnel management. DevGru represented the most elite level of naval special operations, and anyone with that background working in civilian capacity suggested circumstances requiring senior leadership attention. He picked up his secure phone and contacted Rodriguez directly. "Master Chief, I need you in my office immediately. We have a personnel situation that requires your expertise and discretion." Rodriguez arrived at Captain Mitchell's office within 10 minutes, bringing with him Senior Chief Hawkins and the preliminary information they had gathered about Myrna's background and performance. The 3 men represented 67 years of combined naval experience, and they understood the gravity of what they were about to discuss. "Gentlemen," Mitchell began, I've received communications from DevGru Command indicating that our civilian employee Myrna Walsh may be someone with operational background far beyond what her current position suggests. I need you to brief me on your observations and any information you've developed." Rodriguez provided a comprehensive summary of Myrna's performance during the previous day's ceremony, highlighting the tactical competence, communication skills, and military bearing that had drawn senior attention. Hawkins added his assessment of her coordination techniques and situational awareness, noting capabilities that exceeded civilian training. "Captain," Rodriguez concluded, "what we observed wasn't someone who had picked up military procedures from working on a base. This was someone with operational experience demonstrating skills under pressure. Her radio protocols were flawless, her security positioning was tactical, and her bearing was automatic military response to authority." Mitchell listened carefully to their assessments, correlating their observations with the information he had received from DevGru Command. The picture that emerged suggested they were dealing with someone whose background included classified service at the highest levels of special operations. "Based on what you've told me and the communications I've received," Mitchell said, "we need to approach this situation with appropriate sensitivity. If Miss Walsh is operating under protective identity, there are specific protocols we must follow to ensure her safety and operational security." The 3 officers spent the next 30 minutes developing an approach that would allow them to verify Myrna's background without compromising any protective measures that might be in place. Their plan required careful coordination and complete discretion to avoid creating security risks or personal difficulties for someone who might be dealing with complex circumstances. Meanwhile, Myrna had begun her normal duties at the visitor registration desk, but she sensed the changed atmosphere immediately. Conversation stopped when she passed groups of personnel. Senior leaders who had previously offered casual greetings now watched her with obvious interest. The careful anonymity she had maintained was clearly ending. Morrison and his team arrived for morning training exercises, but their demeanor had changed completely since the previous afternoon. Their earlier arrogance had been replaced by genuine curiosity and what appeared to be respectful concern. They approached her desk with obvious uncertainty about how to interact with someone they had badly misjudged. "Miss Walsh," Morrison said carefully, "my team and I wanted to follow up on yesterday's conversation. We realize we may have been completely wrong about your background and experience." Myrna looked at the four young SEALs, noting the sincerity in their expressions and the obvious effort they were making to correct their earlier behavior. "Gentlemen, yesterday taught all of us something about assumptions and first impressions. Perhaps we can move forward with better understanding. Ma'am," Torres added, "if it's appropriate, we'd like to learn from you. Whatever your background includes, you demonstrated capabilities that could help us become better SEALs and better leaders." It was a remarkable reversal from the previous day's disrespect, and Myrna recognized the genuine desire for improvement in their request. But before she could respond, Master Chief Rodriguez approached with Captain Mitchell, their bearing indicating official business rather than casual interaction. "Miss Walsh," Rodriguez said formally, "Captain Mitchell would like to speak with you privately. Would you be available for a brief meeting?" The request was phrased politely, but Myrna understood it was not optional. The senior leadership attention she had been dreading was finally materializing, and her options for deflection were exhausted. "Of course, Master Chief. When would be convenient?" "Now, if possible," Captain Mitchell replied. "We have some questions that require immediate attention." They walked to Mitchell's office in silence, Myrna's mind racing through potential scenarios and appropriate responses. She knew that her carefully constructed civilian identity was about to be examined by people with resources and authority to discover whatever they needed to know. Mitchell's office was designed for serious conversations. Secure communications equipment, classified material storage, and seating arrangements that could accommodate formal briefings. He gestured for Myrna to take a chair facing his desk, while Rodriguez and Hawkins positioned themselves nearby. "Miss Walsh," Mitchell began, "we've received communications from higher authority suggesting that your background may include service with Naval Special Operations, specifically with DevGru. I need to ask you directly. Is this accurate?" The question was direct and unavoidable. Myrna's options for deflection were gone, and she faced a decision about how much truth she was willing to reveal to people she barely knew, but who clearly had legitimate authority to ask. "Captain," she replied carefully, "some backgrounds are complicated. Some service creates circumstances that require careful handling even after it ends." "Miss Walsh," Mitchell continued, "I'm going to share something with you that I received this morning. DevGru, Command contacted me about a civilian employee who might be operating under protective identity following distinguished service and subsequent circumstances requiring security measures." He paused, watching her reaction. "They described someone with your name and general background working in civilian capacity while investigation and protective measures were ongoing. I need to know if you are that person, because if you are, we have specific responsibilities for your safety and security." Myrna felt the last barriers of her constructed anonymity crumbling. These weren't casual questions from curious personnel. This was official inquiry from people with both authority and responsibility for her well-being. The choice was no longer whether to reveal her background, but how to do so safely. "Captain Mitchell," she said finally, "my name is Chief Petty Officer Myrna Walsh, call sign Lighthouse, formerly assigned to DevGru Gold Squadron. I am currently operating under protective identity following completion of classified service and subsequent whistleblower activities that required security measures." The simple statement carried enormous weight. Rodriguez and Hawkins exchanged glances, understanding immediately that they were dealing with someone whose background exceeded their own extensive experience. DevGru represented the absolute pinnacle of military special operations, and Gold Squadron handled the most sensitive missions in that already elite unit. Mitchell leaned forward, his expression serious but supportive. "Chief Walsh, can you tell us about the circumstances that led to your protective status and civilian assignment?" Myrna was quiet for several moments, considering how much detail she could safely share. The investigation and protective measures were ongoing, but the immediate security concerns had been resolved months earlier. "Captain, during my final deployment with DevGru, I discovered evidence of arms trafficking involving members of the command structure. The operation was selling weapons and equipment to hostile organizations, compromising both operational security and national interests. I reported the activity through proper channels, which led to NCIS investigation and eventual prosecutions. She paused, gathering herself for the more difficult part of the explanation. The traffickers had connections throughout the special operations community, and my cooperation with the investigation made me a target for retaliation. NCIS recommended protective identity and civilian assignment until all prosecutions were complete and security threats were neutralized. Rodriguez felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The tactical competence, the operational bearing, the careful anonymity all made sense within the context of someone with elite special operations background hiding from potential threats. Chief Walsh, how long have you been under protective status? And what's the current assessment of security risks? 8 months at this assignment, she replied. NCIS completed the prosecutions 4 months ago, and the last security assessment indicated minimal ongoing risk. I've been cleared to resume normal identity and service if I choose to do so. Hawkins looked puzzled. Chief, if you've been cleared to resume normal service, why are you still working in civilian capacity? Myrna smiled slightly, the first genuine expression of emotion they had seen from her. Senior Chief, after 12 years of operational deployments and 6 months of investigation stress, I needed time to remember who I was outside of tactical operations. Working here has given me perspective on what kind of service I want to pursue going forward. Mitchell nodded with understanding. Military transition, particularly from elite units, often required extended adjustment periods. The psychological demands of special operations could create difficulties that weren't addressed through standard separation procedures. If you know anything about my work yesterday, Myrna continued, you understand that I can't completely escape who I am. When situations require it, my training takes over. But I've enjoyed having responsibilities that don't involve life and death decisions. Before anyone could respond, Mitchell's secure phone rang with a priority communication. He answered formally, listened for several minutes, then thanked the caller and hung up with a concerned expression. Chief Walsh, that was NCIS Agent Collins. She's en route to brief us on a development that may affect your security status. Apparently, yesterday's public interaction with Morrison's team may have compromised your protective identity in ways that require immediate assessment. Myrna felt her stomach drop. The confrontation with Morrison had been witnessed by nearly 80 people, including family members who might share information outside the base community. If her response to the situation had revealed capabilities inconsistent with her civilian identity, word could spread in ways that recreated security risks. What kind of development? She asked. Social media posts from family members at yesterday's ceremony have mentioned a civilian employee who demonstrated unusual competence during communication coordination. While the posts don't identify you by name, they provide enough detail that people with knowledge of your background might be able to connect your current identity to your previous service. The irony was bitter. Morrison's attempt to embarrass her publicly had led to exposure that potentially recreated the security risks she had been avoiding for 8 months. Her professional competence, revealed under pressure, was now creating the visibility she had been trying to avoid. Rodriguez spoke up, with concern evident in his voice. Chief Walsh, what kind of security risks are we talking about? And what can we do to protect you? The original trafficking network included personnel from multiple special operations units, she explained. While the principals had been prosecuted, some associates remain at large with potential motivation for retaliation against witnesses who contributed to their convictions. Agent Collins arrived at Captain Mitchell's office 30 minutes later with a briefcase full of classified documents and a portable secure communication device. Rebecca Collins had been Myrna's primary NCIS contact throughout the investigation and protective period, and her presence indicated serious developments requiring immediate attention. Collins set up her secure communication equipment with practiced efficiency, creating an encrypted connection that would allow discussion of classified information without security concerns. Her expression was serious but not panicked, suggesting manageable problems rather than immediate crisis. Captain Mitchell, Chief Walsh, she began formally, we have a situation requiring immediate decision and action. Yesterday's public demonstration of Chief Walsh's capabilities has created social media attention that may compromise her protective identity. She connected her tablet to the secure display system and showed them social media posts from ceremony attendees. The posts praised an unnamed civilian employee who had coordinated communications during VIP arrival procedures with exceptional competence. While they didn't identify Myrna by name, they provided enough detail about her appearance and capabilities that anyone familiar with her background could potentially make connections. The good news, Collins continued, is that our ongoing monitoring hasn't detected any hostile interest or specific threats related to these posts. The bad news is that Chief Walsh's protective identity is no longer viable for long-term security. What are our options? Mitchell asked. Collins pulled up another document on the secure display. We have 3 primary options. First, we can relocate Chief Walsh to another protective assignment at a different location with a completely new identity. Second, we can restore her original identity and assign appropriate security measures. Third, she can resume active duty with DevGru or another special operations unit where her background provides natural operational security. Before anyone could respond, Collins added, "There's a 4th option that Chief Walsh specifically requested during our previous conversations. She could accept a position here that utilizes her actual qualifications while maintaining appropriate security measures." Rodriguez looked interested. "What kind of position?" "Training and security consultation," Collins replied. "Chief Walsh has 12 years of operational experience with the most elite special operations unit in the military. Her expertise in tactical training, security assessment, and personnel development could be invaluable for Junior SEAL development and base security enhancement." Mitchell considered the options carefully. The 4th choice offered benefits for both Myrna and the base community while addressing security concerns through open acknowledgement rather than continued concealment. "Chief Walsh, what's your preference?" Myrna had been considering this decision for months, knowing that her protective status was temporary and that she would eventually need to choose her future direction. Yesterday's events had forced the timeline, but they had also demonstrated that she couldn't completely suppress her capabilities and training. "Captain, I'd like to remain here and contribute at a level that matches my actual qualifications. I've learned a lot about myself during these 8 months, and I think I can serve effectively in training and development roles." Mitchell nodded approvingly. "That addresses both your personal needs and our operational requirements, but we need to handle the transition carefully to ensure your continued safety." Collins outlined the transition plan that NCIS had developed for situations where protective identity was no longer viable. The process involved gradual revelation of Myrna's background to base personnel, implementation of appropriate security measures, and coordination with her future duties to ensure smooth integration. The first step would be public acknowledgement of her background during a base-wide assembly, allowing controlled revelation rather than continued speculation. Morrison's team would be briefed about their inadvertent role in compromising her protective status, but they would also learn how their behavior had contributed to a positive outcome. Agent Collins left after 2 hours of detailed coordination, having established secure communication protocols and ongoing security monitoring that would continue until all potential risks were fully assessed and addressed. Her departure left Mitchell, Rodriguez, Hawkins, and Myrna to plan the immediate steps of her transition. "Chief Walsh," Mitchell said, "we need to address yesterday's interaction with Morrison's team. They don't understand the security implications of what happened, and they deserve to know how their behavior affected someone who was trying to maintain necessary anonymity." Myrna appreciated the captain's concern for all personnel involved. Morrison and his teammates had been following in their understanding of military culture, and they couldn't be held responsible for consequences they hadn't anticipated. "If it would help support the full revelation," Myrna suggested, "you could focus on why I chose the protective assignment rather than dwelling on what they did wrong." Their apology yesterday demonstrated real growth in their thinking. Rodriguez agreed. "These are good young SEALs who learned an important lesson about assumptions and judgment. If we handle this correctly, it could reinforce that learning while helping them understand how their growth connects to larger issues of respect and security." The base-wide assembly was scheduled for the following morning, giving Mitchell time to coordinate with higher authority and prepare appropriate messaging. The revelation of Myrna's background would be significant news for the entire base community, requiring careful presentation to ensure positive outcomes. That afternoon, Morrison's team was called to Senior Chief Hawkins' office for a conversation that would provide context for the morning's assembly. Hawkins had developed a reputation for straightforward communication and effective mentoring, making him the ideal person to help them understand the situation. "Gentlemen," Hawkins began, "you're here to learn about consequences and responsibility. Yesterday's interaction with Miss Walsh had results that none of you anticipated, and you need to understand what happened. Morrison's expression showed immediate concern. Senior Chief, did we create problems for her? We apologized yesterday, but if there's more we need to do to make things right, we're ready to take responsibility. Hawkins appreciated Morrison's willingness to accept accountability, but the situation was more complex than simple interpersonal conflict. What you need to understand is that Miss Walsh has been working under protective identity following distinguished service with DevGru and subsequent circumstances requiring security measures. The four SEALs looked stunned. Torres spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. Senior Chief, are you telling us that we were harassing someone from DevGru? I'm telling you that your public confrontation with someone trying to maintain necessary anonymity created security risks that required NCIS involvement and immediate protective measures, Hawkins replied seriously. Wilson looked sick. Holy cow, Senior Chief. We had no idea. Is she okay? Are we in trouble for compromising her security? Hawkins saw genuine concern and remorse in their faces. Chief Walsh is safe, and the security situation is being handled appropriately. You're not in legal trouble, but you need to understand that actions have consequences beyond what you can see in the moment. Morrison spoke up with obvious distress. Senior Chief, what can we do to make this right? We misjudged her completely and created problems that could have put her in danger. That's unacceptable, and we take full responsibility. The best thing you can do, Hawkins replied, is learn from this experience and apply those lessons throughout your careers. Chief Walsh has chosen to remain here in a position that utilizes her actual qualifications, and she'll be working with junior personnel on tactical development and security training. Chavez looked hopeful. Does that mean we might have opportunities to learn from her professionally rather than just apologizing for our mistakes? That will be up to Chief Walsh, Hawkins said. But I can tell you that she's already demonstrated more grace and professionalism in this situation than any of you deserved. If you approach future interactions with the respect and humility you should have shown from the beginning, you might earn the privilege of learning from someone with her experience. The assembly the following morning drew the entire base community to the main auditorium. Captain Mitchell had coordinated with DevGru Command and NCIS to ensure that all information shared would be appropriate for public discussion, while providing sufficient context for understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, Mitchell began, we are here to address a personnel situation that affects our entire community. For the past 8 months, we have had someone working among us whose background and qualifications far exceed her assigned position. He gestured for Myrna to join him at the podium, and she walked forward wearing her dress blue uniform with the rank insignia and ribbons that reflected 12 years of distinguished naval service. The transformation from civilian employee to decorated Chief Petty Officer was visually striking and immediately explained the competence that senior personnel had observed. I want to introduce Chief Petty Officer Myrna Walsh, callsign Lighthouse, formerly of DevGru Gold Squadron. Chief Walsh has been working under protective identity following her cooperation with an NCIS investigation that resulted in successful prosecution of personnel involved in arms trafficking. The auditorium was completely silent as Mitchell continued his explanation. The revelation that a DevGru veteran had been working among them, unrecognized, created a collective sense of awe, and, for some, embarrassment about how they had interacted with her. Chief Walsh chose to work in civilian capacity to maintain necessary anonymity while security threats were assessed and addressed. Recent events have made continued concealment unnecessary, and she has chosen to remain with our community in a position that utilizes her actual qualifications. Mitchell turned to Myrna, indicating that she should address the assembly directly. She approached the microphone with the same calm confidence she had shown throughout her civilian assignment, but now her bearing clearly reflected the military bearing that had been partially hidden. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, I want to thank Captain Mitchell and the entire base community for the support and protection you provided during my protective assignment, even when you didn't know you were providing it. Her voice carried clearly throughout the auditorium as she continued. I chose to work here not just for security reasons, but because I needed time to remember who I was outside of tactical operations. What I discovered was that service takes many forms, and there are different ways to contribute to our military community. She looked directly at Morrison's team in the front row before continuing. I also learned that everyone deserves respect and consideration, regardless of their apparent position or background. Some of the most valuable lessons of my civilian assignment came from young SEALs who taught me about growth, accountability, and the importance of giving people opportunities to learn from their mistakes. Morrison felt the weight of her words and the generosity she was showing in framing their behavior as a learning opportunity rather than a failure of character. Her grace under pressure extended beyond tactical operations to personal interactions that demonstrated genuine leadership. Going forward, Myrna concluded, I'll be working with base security and training development, focusing on tactical education and leadership development for junior personnel. I look forward to contributing to your continued growth and success. The applause that followed was sustained and genuine, reflecting both respect for her service and appreciation for her decision to remain with their community. But Morrison knew that applause wasn't enough to address what had happened or demonstrate the growth it had inspired. After the assembly concluded and the auditorium emptied, Morrison approached Myrna with his 3 teammates. Their expressions showed the weight of understanding how badly they had misjudged both her and the situation. Chief Walsh, Morrison said formally, I want to request permission to speak privately with you about yesterday's incident and our behavior. Of course, Petty Officer Morrison. What's on your mind? Ma'am, we understand now that our behavior wasn't just disrespectful to you personally. We potentially compromised your security and created problems that required NCIS involvement and immediate protective measures. That's completely unacceptable, and we take full responsibility. Myrna appreciated the maturity of his response and his understanding of the broader implications of their actions. Petty Officer Morrison, what happened yesterday taught all of us important lessons about assumptions, respect, and consequences. The question now is how we apply those lessons going forward. Torres stepped forward. Chief Walsh, Senior Chief Hawkins mentioned that you'll be working with junior personnel on tactical development. We know we haven't earned the privilege, but we'd like to request assignment to your training programs. Wilson added, we want to learn from you professionally, but more importantly, we want to demonstrate that we can grow beyond the mistakes we made yesterday. Myrna looked at the 4 young SEALs, seeing genuine commitment to improvement rather than simple desire to escape consequences. Their willingness to acknowledge their errors publicly and request opportunities to learn demonstrated the kind of character development that made effective military training possible. Gentlemen, she said finally, I believe people can grow beyond their mistakes when they're willing to do the work required for real change. If you are serious about learning, I'll be announcing training program enrollment next week. You'll have the same opportunity as everyone else to demonstrate your commitment and capability. Chavez smiled with obvious relief and gratitude. Thank you, Chief. We won't let you down. Over the following weeks, Myrna's transition to her new role proceeded smoothly. Her first training session drew 30 junior enlisted personnel to a classroom overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, all eager to learn from someone with operational experience they could barely imagine. Leadership, she began, is not about rank or authority. It's about making decisions under pressure that protect your people and accomplish your mission. Today, we're going to discuss tactical decision-making in crisis situations using real scenarios and practical applications. Morrison's team attended every session, taking detailed notes and asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated their commitment to learning. Their transformation from arrogant newcomers to dedicated students provided a powerful example of personal growth that inspired other participants. After 6 weeks of training, Morrison approached Myrna with a request that showed how much his thinking had developed since their first encounter. Chief Walsh, I've been thinking about leadership development and personal accountability. Would you consider letting me assist with future training programs? I think my experience with misjudgment and growth might help other junior personnel understand the importance of respect and humility. Myrna smiled, recognizing the complete transformation in Morrison's approach to service and leadership. Petty Officer Morrison, that's exactly the kind of thinking that creates effective leaders. Let's discuss how you can contribute to helping others learn from both success and mistakes. 3 months after the assembly, Captain Mitchell held a recognition ceremony acknowledging personnel who had demonstrated exceptional performance and growth. Morrison's team received commendation for their training performance and leadership development, but the real recognition belonged to Myrna. Chief Petty Officer Walsh, Mitchell announced, has established training programs that have improved tactical competence and leadership development throughout our junior personnel. Her expertise and dedication have enhanced our overall readiness while demonstrating that distinguished service continues in many forms. As Mitchell presented her with a formal commendation, the assembled personnel erupted in sustained applause. But what made the moment special wasn't the ceremony itself. It was seeing Morrison and his teammates applauding someone who had chosen to invest in their development despite their initial disrespect. After the ceremony, Rodriguez approached Myrna with obvious satisfaction. "Chief Walsh, how does it feel to be officially recognized for who you really are?" Myrna looked around the ceremony area, noting the respectful attention of junior personnel who had learned to see her as a mentor and resource rather than just another staff member. "Master Chief, it feels like coming home. Not to the past, but to a future where everything I experienced has purpose and meaning." That evening, as Myrna completed her duties and prepared to leave the base, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 8 months ago, she had arrived seeking anonymity and healing. She had found both, but she had also discovered something unexpected. The skills and experience that had defined her operational career didn't have to be buried or forgotten. They could be transformed into something positive that contributed to others' development while allowing her to maintain the stability she needed for continued growth. Morrison and his team had evolved from antagonists to dedicated students, learning not just tactical skills, but fundamental lessons about respect, judgment, and personal growth. Their transformation demonstrated the possibility of change when people were willing to acknowledge mistakes and commit to improvement. The base community had grown to appreciate her contributions while respecting the journey that had brought her to this role. Most importantly, she had learned that service could take many forms and that the transition from operational life didn't have to mean the end of meaningful contribution. As she walked across the base where everything had changed during that confrontation in the DFS, Myrna noticed the subtle differences in how personnel interacted with her now. Respectful acknowledgement from senior enlisted who understood her background, eager attention from junior SEALs who wanted to be included in her training programs, professional courtesy from everyone who recognized her value to the community. The careful anonymity was gone, but in its place was something better. Recognition, respect, and the knowledge that her service continued to matter, not because of what she had been, but because of what she had chosen to become. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but through months of gradual acceptance that her skills and experience were too valuable to keep hidden. The confrontation with Morrison had forced the timeline, but it had also demonstrated that she couldn't completely suppress who she was when circumstances required her capabilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to share her experience with personnel who could benefit from wisdom that only came from operational application under the most demanding circumstances. Her journey from hidden veteran to recognized leader was complete, but her mission of developing others was just beginning. Real warriors serve at every level. Rank is earned through respect, not demanded through position. Chief Petty Officer Myrna Walsh had found her way home to a future where service took new forms and old wounds could heal through helping others grow stronger.
These stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our EV Story channel, and turn on the bell. See you in the next story.